Well, good morning. Happy Wednesday, everyone. I am here with you and have my cup of coffee like usual on these Wednesday morning check-ins. That's why we call it Coffee with PC. I made a little cup of coffee when I got to the office and used it. This is great. This is that little heater on my desk. So I made the coffee early and kind of just been sipping on it, and it's still there. Really about done. Yeah, going to be finished soon, but I wanted to spend these last minutes sipping this last little bit of coffee with you on this Wednesday morning. We come to a very interesting section of Matthew's account of the life of Jesus. It's really a key interaction, probably one that's pretty well known for a lot of reasons, and we're not going to jump into all the ins and outs of it. We're just going to kind of take a high level view, but it's a moment that Jesus gets with his disciples. He's been pretty busy. He's been performing miracles. He's had crowds coming to him needing healing and asking for healing. He's been healing. He's been teaching. He has been busy. He's even been confronted by the religious leaders. There's this kind of back and forth that exists between them. And the passage we get to in Matthew 16 today seems to be a much more private moment where he and his disciples, they've actually pulled way up north to an area called Caesarea Philippi, kind of out of the realm of all of those crowds. And they have a few minutes together, and he asks his disciples a couple of questions. The first question really sets up the second one, and the first question is, who do people say that I am? Now, these disciples had been watching him. They'd been listening to him. They'd been seeing him perform miracles. They'd been interacting and dealing with all of these crowds. And so it's a natural question that Jesus might ask. All these people that come to me, what do they think about me? Who do they say that I am? And the disciples replied. Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others, Jeremiah or one of the prophets. So the crowds that are coming to Jesus, as you would expect, recognize him in this tradition of these Old Testament prophetic types. John the Baptist was his cousin, we know, but he had a very prophetic ministry. That was kind of his sort of thing, a very kind of on the edges of things ministry we could talk about. He was out by the Jordan River, ate locusts and wild honey, dressed in an unusual way, kind of on the edge. And a lot of the prophetic figures of the Jewish people were sort of that, not sort of cut from the same cloth. They were at times had a little eccentricity. They had their quirks about them, and those were the things that set them apart. John the Baptist, a more New Testament example, but in that tradition. Elijah, we know about him, particularly from the Old Testament, taken to heaven, a chariot of fire, and Jeremiah are one of the prophets. I think it's interesting, as one commentator points out, that they said Jeremiah, because Jeremiah is sometimes called the weeping prophet, because he comes right before Israel is occupied, the southern kingdom, I should say, is occupied by Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar comes in, and his prophecy is doom and gloom. And so maybe there was a sense with some people interacting with Jesus that he was kind of in that category, more of a negative doomsday type prophet. I don't know where they might have felt that, but that's one of the only prophet other than Elijah that they kind of mentioned by name. But this is what people thought of Jesus. They saw him in the religious tradition of Israel as a religious person, as a teacher who spoke about and for God, which you would think those are good things. Those aren't bad views of Jesus. In fact, if we were to look around today, a lot of people would have probably similar opinions. Could you imagine if you went, I don't know where you would go. I would say a mall, but are malls even a thing anymore? It's kind of a different sort of thing. Well, wherever you went, maybe you went in the Keys here. We have these festivals from time to time, whether it's up at Rouse or down in Marathon or wherever. We have these festivals. People get together. If you went to one of those and just went around, man on the street interview, who do you say that Jesus is? You would probably get some answers like this. You'd probably get some other answers. I think in general, people would think about maybe a good moral teacher or someone who spoke for or about God. I don't know if they'd necessarily use the word he was a prophet of God or not, but in fact, even other religions, non-Christian faiths, look at Jesus in sort of that way. So what the crowd said, it's not that it's wrong, it's just kind of incomplete. They're seeing him, they're flocking to him because there's something about him that's attractive, but as the disciples are seeing it, they're saying this is how they view you, much like these other people. And then Jesus really kind of turns the screws, we might say, and he gets to the heart of the matter. For the disciples, And I'm going to make the point for us too. He says, so who do you then say I am? What about you? These 12 individuals who had been closest to Jesus, who had got that front row seat to all of this, who had experience with these crowds, who do you say that I am? And Peter speaks up. His great confession, often cited as one of the key moments in the life of these disciples, maybe one of the ones that puts him as one of the leaders of the early church because of this moment. Maybe one of the oldest of the disciples is also another thing that we think about Peter, but he speaks up, as was often his case. He's the one that spoke up and wanted to walk on water, remember? He's always got something to say. And he says, you are the Christ, or you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. So let's break down those two parts. You are the Christ, or the Messiah. A lot of times we call Jesus Christ, as if his last name is Christ. But Christ isn't a surname, like I'm Pastor Charles Rosenbaum. Christ is a title. Christ is the Greek word that's the equivalent of the Hebrew word that we get Messiah from. So Christ and Messiah, two different languages, mean the same thing. The literal idea is the anointed one is what's at issue there. And so Peter is saying, you are the Messiah, you are the Christ, you are the anointed one. Put another way, you are the promised one, or the prophesied one that God said would come and would be his agent on earth. But he goes beyond that and he says, not only are you the Christ, that promised one, but you are the Son of the living God. Now, this is really where the rubber meets the road. And to understand why that's significant, let's kind of look at some other places to see there were times when Jesus, claiming to be the Son of God, got him in some trouble. For instance, over in the Gospel of John chapter 5, I just marked it so I could turn there real quick. In John chapter 5, Jesus is claiming that God is his Father. He said to the Jewish leaders, my Father is always at work to this day, and I too am working. In the very next verse, John 5:18, for this reason the Jews tried all the harder to kill him. Not only that he was breaking the Sabbath, which was pretty important. We saw that with the washing hands things, right? But he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. So you see, they're pretty upset. That's a blasphemous claim that he's equal with God, that God is his Father. And the Jews recognized that's what he was saying. Fast forward to John chapter 18, and we're at or 19, I should say, and we're at his trial. And it's the Pilate back and forth, what am I going to do with him? And Pilate says to them, he's kind of arguing with the Jews. He wants to release Barabbas. He doesn't see any reason for Jesus to die. And the Jews insisted. It says, we have a law, and according to that law, he must die because he claimed to be the Son of God. So Jesus, the Son of God, is a big claim. It's a blasphemous claim. It's a claim that equates, if God is his Father, he's God's Son. He is equal with God. He is what we would call in the Christian world, God incarnate, or God in the flesh. This is huge confession Peter makes. Not just that I think you're a religious person, not just that I think you're a prophet in the line of so many other prophets, but that I think you are the promised one, the anointed one of God. More than that, I think you are God himself. You are the Son of the living God. You are equal with God. We call that the incarnation, as I said, that Jesus is God the Son, not just the Son of God, but he is God the Son. And Peter, in this great confession, acknowledges that central truth. That's the cornerstone of our Christian faith. Really, that is the number one question. Who is Jesus? That we have to face. I think all of us ultimately will have to answer for our answer to that question. Who do you think Jesus is? There are a lot of options. But for Peter, for me, for our church, for our tradition, for our Christianity, the only right answer is Jesus is the Messiah, the promised one of God, the Savior, who is the Son of God, who is God the Son, God that became incarnate and bears on himself our sin, the curse of the law, so that we can be freed from that curse of the law. And in doing that, provides for us forgiveness, salvation, and life with God in his eternal kingdom. That's the hope that we have. But it all comes through Jesus, and it all comes through understanding who he is uniquely, set apart from even the great tradition, in this case, of Israel and the Hebrew Bible. I hope you know and have come to know Jesus as Messiah, as Savior, as Christ, as Anointed One, as the Promised One, as the Son of God, as God the Son, and the Savior of the world, and you've placed your faith in Him. As always, if you haven't, we'd love to have that conversation to talk more about how you can know the love and grace and forgiveness of God as expressed through Jesus, His Son. That's why we exist as a church. That's why we do the stuff that we do. That's why we gather and worship, because we believe He is worthy of worship. As always, please come join us. Sunday mornings, 9 a.m. We'll be right here. I'd love to have you join us here in Key Largo. We stream our services, but I always encourage people, come on down, find a seat. There's plenty available on a Sunday. We'd love to have you with us. And we'd love to talk to you more about what it means to place your faith in Jesus, who is the Messiah, the Son of God. If you want to have that conversation, if you want to know more, get in touch with us. We'd love to do that, or better yet, come and see us and have that personal conversation, because that's what we're about and that's why we exist. All right, I've said a lot of words. I've said them pretty fast, probably because I've had maybe a little too much coffee. I'm going to go finish this last few sips and get on with my day and allow you to get on with yours. Thanks as always for spending a few moments with me. Hope the rest of your week goes great, and love to see you join us in worship on Sunday.